When did you kind of realize that it was going to be just the two of you in the episode?
It was today I learned.
I was today years old.
I was today years old that I learned that, oh, y'all are telling our story.
Hi, welcome to episode 5 of After Love, the official Black Love After Show. We are joined by Felicia and Karika, and I cannot even begin to say how much I have just waited to be here with you guys again. You know, Tommy and I sat down with you for the first time February, March of this year, and there's just so much, just began deciding how to share your story, that we're so grateful and honored that you all allowed us to listen and learn and to share. And when Tommy came to me and said, here's the episode, it's just the two of them, this is it. And I was like, duh. You know, there was no conversation. So I just wanted to say how grateful that we are to be here with you guys again, and how excited and nervous I am for your reaction.
Obviously, I'm speechless. It was so beautiful. I really appreciate the care that you both took to telling this story. And just, I'm still processing, right? Like, we just watched this, so. The way that you have honored my daughter, I could have never even have imagined this. I really couldn't have. And I'm so grateful for how gentle you were both with us. And even just the courage to tell this story in this way. I think that you beautifully captured grief. I think that grief is often thought about as something that is painful, it's not something that people even want to interact with. But it felt so beautiful to me. And I really appreciate it.
I think, to my surprise, in addition to not knowing what to expect, I didn't expect to smile as much as I did when watching it. It started in such a beautiful time of our life. And I think that gave me the ability to breathe, to process, not knowing what would come next, but the idea that the smiling and the laughter just really helped me be present. To live in grief, to understand it, to understand that it isn't linear. I can be anywhere on the spectrum any given day. And anything can trigger the deep wave, or sometimes just like that warm light. I think of grief in these contexts of like anywhere from deep, dark, so just call that like the abyss of the ocean, just to like the warm light that also radiates love. So being able to smile was really important, but also seeing Felicia smile. So I'm still very much in I'm still learning what it means to be a parent in this way. I'm still learning how to be an angel parent. But among that, because the public has not quite learned how to have a conversation about grief, because they don't understand the power of love that is in grief, I still have to do a little buffering and protecting of Felicia in public spaces. And she can totally protect herself in that way, but people don't know what to say, and we've experienced it. So I'm watching as we are sharing this in the public space, but I'm also watching her body to see how she feels, to see if I have to make a call. Like, I don't know, right? But all these things are really happening real time. For one of the first times in our journey as Kamayu's parents, I had the opportunity to just be. And that was really important for me because it's been a long road of protecting and covering and buffering. So she's smiling, I'm smiling, and I'm like, this is a good feeling. And it happened in such a really natural, real way. Like, that's actually so closely mirrors how the day goes. We can go from laughter and thinking about high school and dating and choirs into like, we're Kamayu's parents and we're trying to learn what that means. And that episode really took a natural course of turns. It was so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. It's funny, like this is a love fest, right? Because it's hard. We've talked a few times. It's hard sometimes to hear you guys and your gratitude to us when I'm like, none of this would be possible without your vulnerability, your incredible ability to articulate what you're feeling, or even when you don't know what you're feeling. Like, it's just not something you encounter in human beings often. And so I'm just eternally grateful for that from you all. And I want to say too that the gift of social media, the gift and the curse of social media is like, that's how I found you, right? Like, you know, you shared so much, Kariga, so many moments of, I'll tell you what sticks out in my head the most. There's an image of like your friends with their hands on your shoulder. And you were talking about check on your strong friends. And this is you posted this like, you know, a long time ago now, but, you know, check on your strong friends and just sort of giving your friends gratitude for covering you and being there for you. And you just don't see that sort of sharing, that sort of vulnerability anywhere, especially social media, you know, and then from a man at that. And there were so many things obviously going on for you all during this time, but that one stands out to me a lot because I was like, this brother is giving us a gift, you know, by sharing.
Kamayu, you know, we learn, right? The moment a child is born, so is a mother, so is a father. She birthed a type of permission for me in Black masculinity, in presenting the way I do. My perspective, my size, all these things add to the narrative of how she gave me permission. Just today, my phone gave me a memory of something that happened in 2015. And I had just dapped up a father, and I was about to dap up the son, and the son hugged me instead of dapping me up. And that was so profound for me, that he had the courage to show that type of emotion and that the space was safe enough for that to happen. That lasted with me, but I didn't understand it until just seeing it again this morning when my phone gave me the reminder. And I think what's happening in this experience is being Kamayu's father. One, her name is Silent Warrior, one who loves relentlessly. And I think that relentless type of love is what this age calls for. So whoever has the privilege to call for love or to bring love into space, let us all do it, right? It's just time. It's time in a different way to what it means to have this type of privilege to call love into space. The gentleness, the touch, all these things that I think at some point we unlearned about that power, right? I call like the power, the strength of gentleness. Take an acrobat. They're incredibly strong, right? But their whole performance is based around gentleness and grace. So I like they're redefining, the reframing in that way. But Kamayu is responsible for that. I'm her daddy, and that's what she wants. Wow.
So when did you kind of realize that it was going to be just the two of you in the episode?
It was today I learned.
I was today years old.
I was today years old that I learned that, oh, y'all are telling our story.
There's courage. I just want to name, there's courage for us to bear our story. There's an honor that comes with the way Felicia let us share, that she even took the story to that space. And folks may see it as courageous in a way, and by all means courageous, but it's the only way we know how to be Kamayu's parents. Mm-hmm. But I think there's also courage to do what you all did. You're right. So 4 months, we were like, what happens? What actually happens now? Based upon what we know, how the public has a conversation around marriage, and then how the public has a conversation around Black love. Like, what did we impart that can be translated across the spectrum of the show, right? So we really were asking ourselves 4 months, so much that we just had to stop, because we could not wrap our minds around how the story would be told. Yeah. But the only thing that gave us comfort was you all's gentleness. Every iteration, every communication reinforced trust. So that helped us stop racing. Because you also remember, our minds are always racing at what people may think about this situation, because neonatal loss has so much opinion and the brain is trying to figure out what happened. So that was scary for us to kind of open up about that. Mm-hmm. But there's also courage in the way you chose to handle the story, honor the people. You all did such an amazing job at taking a leap into, because grief is also love. Mm-hmm. And you learn how to show that. Mm-hmm. And if marriage is till death do us part, what we have to remember is that the marriage is also going to experience layers and layers of grief as we age, and who was at the wedding may not be there at the 5-year anniversary, and who was at the wedding may not be there tomorrow. All these things, and marriages experience those together, but we don't talk about that part. So I love that we are creating some space to understand how we all live grief and how powerful it can teach us about love.
I keep looking at you because when we went to sit down with Kariga and Felicia, you knew nothing.
I knew nothing at all.
We had an Instagram relationship and then we showed up at their house and Tommy was like, this is different. This feels different.
It wasn't even that. We talked a bit before, but even then I still didn't really understand. And I think I may have said this to you. As we were shooting, I don't know which it was, because I think it was sort of in sync, but I could hear one of your heartbeats. And it was it was there the entire time. And so I had as you know, it's I'm shooting and doing sound and doing all of it. And so as this whole thing is happening, I'm hearing the heartbeat over every single line and over every single silence. And I'm not a particularly emotional person. And we've probably done 200 interviews at this point. And I don't know if, I was just crying and I couldn't stop. And of the 200 interviews that we've done, it's the only one I've cried at. Only one. And it was in the courage to tell the story, what you went through, how you went through it, how you comforted each other, how you supported each other, the ability to articulate the emotion, because many of us have emotions, but the ability to turn that into something, or even the wherewithal to understand that grief is love with no place to go. Mm-hmm. It's giant.
And I just want to repeat, can you repeat that? Because I've been saying it all year, thanks to meeting you guys earlier this year, but grief is just love with no place to go.
And so it was an interview unlike any that or just speak for me, that I've ever done. Again, we've done 200 of these. And I'm not an emotional person. I'm really not. But it wrecked me. And I think that and as we were going through and putting the season together and thinking about it, I don't cut the show. It's like, that's not, we have an editor who's great, who's fantastic, and we've a process and a whole whatever. But for your story, it was just something that was, I didn't know how we could possibly do it with anybody else. Because again, we don't have any other interviews like you. We don't have any other people like you. And so the idea of trying to, it just didn't make sense. And so Cody and I sort of talked about it a little bit, sort of just in theory. And then, like you said, I went off and did it myself.
Yeah. That's what he does.
The laughter that just follows, like that's what I know life to be like.
Yeah.
It has so much vastness. We can go from one emotion to the other. I think that we are more powerful when we can go from one emotion to the other.
I agree.
When we're not afraid to go into the next set of emotions. You talked about that heartbeat. It just makes me think, obviously, right? It's like folks who have been in the place of expecting a child. With the heartbeat is something we all look for measure and remember the syncopation and the BPMs and all those things. But what also happened is I've learned a new type of intimacy, a closeness with Felicia from the pregnancy and through on. The way we can understand body language, the way we often breathe and reset together. And we realize that taking a deep breath gives everybody a permission. And that's really powerful in that way, right? And we all often, it's like time for a deep breath, time for a reset, especially in just where we are right now, right? But what I really learned was powerful. You all highlighted our ability to articulate how we feel. Something really powerful that I've learned from Felicia is to articulate when you don't know how to express how it feels. You just put a bookmark, just mark it. And that gives everybody permission to be like, okay, something just happened that we don't know how to express yet. But if we have the courage to keep going into that feeling, we'll learn it. So between the two of us, there's just been this dance of, here's what I think I'm feeling. Here's what I may not know what I'm feeling, but I'm gonna have the courage to say I'm feeling something.
I think what's so important about that is that people oftentimes, they see the end result, they don't see the journey. And so they see, or we see, you can express your emotions articulately. Well, it's not just an innate gift, it's something that you work on. It's something that, I'm feeling something, so we need to own that, we need to sit in that, we need to figure out how to articulate that. We need to put the work in to articulate that, because if we can't articulate it, then how do you fix it? And it may not be fixable, but how do you even address it? Because you may be talking about two entirely different things because the other person doesn't understand it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so important to be able to name it. And I think that I've been allowed this process, and I have to acknowledge that not all parents who experience neonatal loss and who are having to exist in their grief may not be able to do it in this way. I've had the privilege to be able to take the time each day and exist in the ebbs and flows as they come and allow them to be, and to be able to name them. And when I can't name them, I always say, I can't, but I have to get this out. I have to say it. Even if it's something that is completely, I'm afraid of it, I say it. And Karika hears me, he acknowledges it with me, and then it just goes away. It's like.
Or revisits.
Or we revisit, yeah.
So that we learn how to be with it. Maybe it was the responsibility for the day was just to say, hey, I think it's here. Let's revisit it and let's see what comes after. Something that is also comes from what we may understand in one day may not actually apply to the next day, or it may be, we might be building upon the learning. As we say, grief is love with no place to go. We've also learned that in the continuum of that statement, it creates the conditions for us to go inward, right? And then you realize, or I have to do the work to remove whatever's occupying love's territory. Because love is the only thing that's going to enable me to get through this. There's not a friend I can call. There's no one who can take this away. There's no one who can fix this. We are in it. So what do I have to get rid of to learn how to be in this better? And the work has been getting rid of anything occupying love's territory. That is our way to feel Kamayu. That is our way to be her parents. When we make love present, when we make love known. So even though like you feel like it's love with no place to go, it's really begging us to go inward and to remove things so that she can take residence with us. I think of parents who have children who are away at school or away on assignment. They don't get to hold that child. What they hold is the love for that child. We not expect to learn it with a newborn or an infant, but I have to look at the whole spectrum of parenting to find my place as Kamayu's father. I shared in the episode like how early the identity crisis started to happen. Where do I belong? It was unreal how immediate my feeling displaced in the maternity ward happened when I was not there with my child. It just, all these questions go to your head. Do I belong here? Am I supposed to be here? Do I look awkward? Do I look like a threat? All these things, because what you think is that your child gives you this label, if you will, right? I am your parent and I am here and I'm not a threat. Going through grief as a Black man, I remember we had a visit at the hospital and Mom Lynette took me on a walk to watch my back so I could grieve out loud. I couldn't do it in the hospital yet. The rage, me knowing that this rage will make the public uncomfortable. So having to like filter my feelings. Where can I grieve safely? Where can I say it safely? And it wasn't Felicia's responsibility at that time to find out, nor was it anybody in that room who was grieving. But there is this interconnectedness we've learned. And this isn't my first time with grief in this way. Context, I lost my brother to gun violence in 2014. And I watched my family trying to humanize the beautiful person he was and tell his story. I remember the local media did not acknowledge him and his identity until they learned he was an educator. And then they came to film at the school and get the testimonies of people who knew him as an educator. But if he was not an educator, he would have just been a statistic. And the news would have done with his story what they always do with our stories. I had all this happening in my head while still trying to process what it's like. My daughter we've just experienced a double transition. And I realized that if we don't start talking about grief, then there's gonna be people who are trapped inside with no safe place to talk about it, no safe place to express it, no safe place to get it out their bodies. I shook a stop sign. I tried to take it out the ground. I had so much going through my body. A tree, anything that could hold or withhold what I wanted to dish out. I went for things that were stable. And she watched my back as I did that. She's also lost a child to gun violence. So we share this relationship and identity. And it just makes me think, how are we doing with this grief that is stuck inside of our bodies with no place to be expressed? I couldn't imagine. So Black Love, you all helped tell our story, but it's not just ours. There are so many folks who didn't have the privilege as we identify it to grieve, to have time to process. Capitalism demands that we produce and we have an identity around producing, not feeling, not understanding how we feel. So I really have the deepest hopes that this episode and this story liberates and creates the conditions for so many folks dealing with so much compounded grief to start to sort that and to say for yourself, like, my emotional work is work. It doesn't have to be measured by what my tech or identity is. Me working on myself is noble work.
And you're absolutely right. And the other gift that I think that you all have helped us to share is how we can support those experiencing grief, right? Because as you guys mentioned, a lot of times people don't have a clue what to say. And that sometimes is, and then you want to say the right thing or do the right thing. And sometimes that's just, or I would say, one of the biggest lessons from the outside, because I think many of us have experienced grief in different ways. And, for me, it's not the loss of a child, but my father. And we've talked about how grief shows up on different days in different ways, for part of the day, for all of the day, for a week. But many of us don't know what to say or how to give that space that you describe Mama Lynette giving you, right? And to enforce that space that we now, frankly, learn from you is so necessary to give to our loved ones. And so I think that that's one of the gifts, besides you guys articulating how important that is for you, but for those who love you.
It was a few months after we learned that the ones who loved us were also experiencing grief.
Yeah.
They were grieving who we used to be, and they were also grieving Kamayu. And it was challenging to learn how to create the conditions that allow us to address that in each person.
Yeah, I remember you talked about basically the concentric waves, where if there's an explosion, you have the people who are in the center, and then you have people who are outside of it who are affected, and then people outside of that who are also affected. And so,
who often feel bad for feeling anything at all, when they feel like, well, it should all be about you.
What I loved so much too about watching this episode is how he's been able to hold me. Even how you described, Tommy, I shared that moment where it feels like, okay, there's an explosion and I am in the center of it, right? And I think of Kariga as being right here. And then I think of our mothers, and then it goes, and then there's friends, and then there are other people who are friends of friends, and then there's Instagram, and then and it just keeps going. And I'm fascinated with, in that explosion, Kariga's ability to have experienced it the way that he has, and then be able to almost even pull me at the same time. I was just thinking about that. Now as we're processing it, it's so fascinating to me. Your strength, and I don't even want to label it as strength, because honestly, I used to get so annoyed when people be like, oh my gosh, you're so strong. And I just feel like you're saying that because you're not in it, and you want to be able to name it as something, right? But I don't know how you're able to pick us up.
You know the old folks when they say, but God? I think I was devastated. My world broke. I had to tell her that our baby didn't survive, and I had to tell her twice. After the first time, and me seeing that she couldn't process what I just said, after I went in my head and tried to put together the most gentle truth. And I realized when I had to say it again, my responsibility was going to change. I talked about me knowing the type of love she deserves, and I haven't seen the world display it yet. But I know it's real, and I know it's there. So however I have to evolve, whatever I have to remove that's occupying love's territory so I can better love her, I'll do that. So if that work means that me as a man has to do work on myself to figure out how to support a mother, she is my wife, she is my friend, but I don't know what it means to share my body with a being. I don't know what it means to have my bladder leaned on at 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to have to train my appetite and my person and all my function around making room for this person to come. I don't know that work. And I watched her do it. And in many cases, I shared with the world as she was doing it. But all those things inform why I make room to learn how. I also acknowledge that, like, for me, my faith was a large part of learning how to love Felicia. It had very little to do with my desire to do it well, and more about recognizing that my wife was going to be, if you will, loaned to me for a lifetime. But that the truest of my heart, the things that I don't say, God is fully aware of how those things show up in my behavior. So I even had to work on how I think about things to fully learn how to love her. And I'm still learning. But I just could not let the world mishandle a grieving mother. From the work that I've seen with the mothers who've lost children to gun violence, from what I've seen my mother do through Be Imaginative in these spaces, I could not let them mishandle her. There's a tragedy I would describe when we miss the opportunity to let grief grow us. It's not just sorrow and something to be sad about. There are multiple experiences happening at once. But one of the ones that I leaned into was how this would grow us, how this would evolve us. And I want Kamayu to be proud of us. I want her to be proud of her parents. I want Felicia to be proud that she's Kamayu's mother. I want her to be proud of me. So that it requires a different thing from me to do that. Because there's no one to tell me how to be her parent. And I don't get to watch her walk. I have a big family, a lot of siblings. I'm not the youngest, but we were the last to have children. And I watched as my nieces were turning different ages, and we were watching them get their steps and getting their vocabulary. And our growth with Kamayu doesn't look that way. What it looks like is our ability to understand one another, our ability to make room for one another to grow and evolve. And then, like all parents, our ability to recognize that these are all our children, and we want them to grow up with access to resources and habits of mind that let them evolve. So this work is now not just about being Kamayu's parents, but what does it mean for us to feel? And how are we going to be more deeply connected as a people because we feel?
And this, I just want to say, like, the episode is so important to me, just as you've stated, because when you're in the thick of it, you are looking for a reference, right? I was searching, trying to make sense of this, trying to see someone who has experienced this and understand, okay, what is your path looking like? And not to say that we all have the exact same experience, because we don't, and I learned that. But it is so important to be able to know, like, okay, because now I realize I'm not really alone. I felt less alone when I found those other mothers I shared about. Like, it's so very important to the process. And I really appreciate how beautifully you told that story. And it is my only hope that it may be a reference for someone else.
I'm with you 100%. That is a large part of why we do any of this, right? But I will say that part of so early last year, a good friend of mine's 7.5-month-old baby passed away. And one of my obsessions became wanting to find examples for her and her husband to be okay. And it wasn't because they were threatened, like they're strong as a unit, right? They're a strong couple. But for me, that was how I felt I could help. And so it was just wanting to create a resource, an example. And I know I'm putting a lot on you guys now, but because you far exceeded my expectations in terms of showing the world what it looks like to love each other and to continue to connect and be a strong couple despite grief or learning through grief, evolving through grief. And so, I'm so grateful. Thank you.
It's great. When we talk about this feeling of identity, Black manhood, Black fatherhood, I am really understanding that like any science of configuration of any sort, it's like science is art and art is science. And we're learning that like Black love, like telling these stories adds to the scientific validity. So this is just like, it's not just anecdotal storytelling. We don't have any data that our stories exist in these multiple varied ways. So I love that we're adding reference in that way for the people who have not learned to feel yet. Well, then maybe you can feel the data because our stories are real, our families are real. And then when you really look at what it means to participate in Black love, you realize, we take inventory of what it means to be a Black man in the world, a Black woman in the world, the way we grew up, our formative experiences, our parents' experiences, learning to see without judgment, right? But being able to look and see what the context is providing and maybe why our parents raised us the way they did without judging that, but seeing it as conditions. Do you realize like Black love is a fine art? And you all are finally, for me, finally giving it the fine art lens that Black stories deserve. We're nuanced and so brilliant in so many different ways. And they don't give our stories that depth. They don't give...
That's the problem. For so long, it's been they.
Yeah.
Come on. Come on. Come on, man. Come on. That's it.
Yeah.
But you all, everything that becomes of you to do this work, the family that lends you to this work, the people who have given you the experiences, I have deep gratitude for your family and extended family beyond. I don't know how to produce work at this level in a family unit and still exist outside of this work. So I just want to name that gratitude that I actually practice when your name shows up on my phone, when a text message comes through, when a call comes through. I'm deeply grateful that your storytelling, that you lend your life to this work. I think just about what it means. Like, yeah, we went to Hampton. It's cool, but and Howard, Hampton and Howard.
Carry on.
But,
Both of you.
But like, we grew up in Meadowview, Sacramento.
Valley.
I think about what it means for kids in Meadowview. It's where Stephon Clark was taken from us. I grew up on that same street. What does it mean for people in my neighborhood to see Fee and Riga in this type of story?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean for them to believe that there is power in our union? What does it mean to believe that there is power in building together and loving one another and learning how to love one another? Not this disposable relationship type of philosophy. Like, at some point, it's not all disposable, right? We learned that with our earth and trash and recycling. So like, I love the fact that the youngsters in our direct community, not the affiliated community, they get to see this Black love. And I believe like that's how we build our communities again, through love.
Through love.
You said it. Thank y'all for this very special After Love.
I made it through without crying.
You're the only one.
Y'all are so tight. Y'all are so tight. Y'all are so tight. Y'all are so tight.